I want to turn now to a warning, certainly one here that parents need to hear with Halloween coming up. It's about potentially deadly fentanyl pills that look like candy. Drug officials in New York confiscated 15,000 of the rainbow-colored pills, and many of them were hidden in a Lego box, and they're turning up all over the country.
This morning, federal agents with an urgent warning to parents about rainbow fentanyl pills, the colors of candy.
This is every parent's worst nightmare as Halloween fast approaches.
Yeah, okay. So I woke up this morning and this story was on all the major news networks. And I decided, well, crap, I guess I've got to do an episode and revisit this. So today, let's talk about fentanyls. Specifically, the rainbow fentanyls with big, exaggerated finger quotes around it that have everybody hyped up because of news reports right now. I teach a PR class among many of the classes I teach at different universities. And that's what really triggered in me when I heard this story being reported the way it was being reported this morning. You probably heard it by now, but just in case you haven't, check out how they're describing the reason that this fentanyl is actually colored the way it is.
In New York City, 15,000 rainbow fentanyl pills seized from a car just days ago, many of them found in this yellow Lego box. Doctors especially concerned the pills may appeal to teens or young adults.
The DEA warning states that drug traffickers are deliberately targeting young people, trying to lure them into addiction with these new batches of rainbow fentanyl.
This is deliberate. This is calculated. This is treacherous deception to market rainbow fentanyl like candy. This is every parent's worst nightmare, especially in the month of October as Halloween fast approaches.
Drugs inside toys, described as newly packaged poison. The DEA gives an alarming account of a major rainbow fentanyl bust here in the city. 15,000 fentanyl pills were confiscated during an arrest on 10th Avenue near 36th Street last Wednesday. The drugs were hidden inside a Lego container.
To a very young person, the potential for tragedy is very high.
No shit, right? I mean, we live in a culture where we've got these drugs that are invented to replace old drugs that we outlaw, and they keep getting more potent and more, quote, dangerous. But we ignore all that, and we pretend these chemicals just fell out of the sky. Fentanyls wouldn't be popular on the street like they are if heroin wasn't so expensive. And heroin never would have been as expensive as it is if we hadn't been warring against it for 100 years. In that taboo, that stigma that comes from not being willing to talk openly about a substance, it turns into romance in the minds of kids. I mean, we are, after all, telling him it's the most dangerous and therefore the most fun drug in the world. It's not. All right, that Lego box is a good place to start because it kind of just slipped into the story. And in some news reporting, it was actually described alongside images of what looked like a package going through the post office or a new box of Legos, like somebody was selling them in the store that way. That's the news subconsciously appealing to our maternal or paternal instincts. They're associating toys with the actual drugs, as if that's what cartel members are trying to do, smuggle fentanyl pills to your kids.
And in California, at least 9 reported cases of teens in the Los Angeles school district reportedly overdosing on pills containing fentanyl.
Now, who knows what the real story is here? I mean, maybe the kids thought they were taking Vicodin, but they purchased it on the street and it was laced with fentanyl. Or maybe they thought they were buying MDMA and instead it was fentanyl because it was purchased on the street. Or maybe, and perhaps most likely, they've been watching the same news stories we've all seen, and they think that fentanyl is a lot more exciting than it is. Now, of course, I'm not a medical doctor. This show's never about medical advice. But I am a longtime fentanyl user. And while it managed to get rid of the detox associated with my previous heroin addiction, and it definitely got me high, as far as a drug I would have wanted to do as a kid, it's not it. I mean, just a reminder, it was designed to be used in hospitals because it hits way harder than heroin and it wears off way faster than heroin. So that way they could do inpatient procedures, send you home, instead of having to keep you overnight. But my point is that kids would be much more likely to use a beginner drug or a lighter drug if those things were available, and if there wasn't so much romance surrounding this allegedly new drug called fentanyl. the one everybody's all up in arms about. Public relations, also known as PR, is a field that's focused on deliberately and strategically putting out the image of an organization that you want the public to see. It's why companies that have nothing to do with environmental issues often advertise with green campaigns. It's why Nike hired Colin Kaepernick to sell its shoes. And it's why, if you watched the TV show Narcos, you saw what was, in this part at least, a true story with Pablo Escobar constantly giving money away to people. That was his PR, his public relations, and in truth, it's the only way he, and nowadays other cartels that still exist, it's the only way that they stay ahead of the law. And that makes sense, because when you're running an organization that's illegal, you've got a lot to lose. It's best to have as few enemies as possible and as many friends as possible. My point is, even though we don't usually think about it from our perspective in the United States, narcotics manufacturers and distributors have a lot to lose if they don't keep some kind of public support, especially considering they often use so much violence to discipline their trade because they can't call the police. And the last thing a narcotics distribution network would want to do is to piss off parents in the United States and bring that sort of indignant, righteous heat upon themselves that comes with that sort of attention. It just doesn't make good business sense. But that wasn't the only news story yesterday involving fentanyl.
It was the single largest fentanyl seizure ever on an American highway, and it happened here on I-70 in Colorado, one of the main drug trafficking routes across the country. State police stopped a driver weaving in and out of traffic dangerously, and a quick-thinking state trooper realized something wasn't right. At a nearby exit, the Colorado State Patrol discovered what was really behind those nerves. Bags and bags of fentanyl stashed under the car's floorboards. According to the affidavit, once he was in custody, a DEA agent struck a deal with Maldonado. He would continue on to South Bend, Indiana, where he said he was headed, and lead them to the drug dealers. Maldonado hit the highway. He then promptly ditched a tracking device and the DEA and vanished.
We've got a record amount of fentanyl involved here. In fact, enough fentanyl to kill everyone in the state of Colorado.
There it is again. This idea that fentanyl in and of itself is a chemical is not only dangerous and deadly, but it's just out there floating around, as if everyone in the state of Colorado might just bump into it and die.
This story is so concerning. Drug enforcement agents say 2 milligrams of fentanyl can kill a person. Police say the amount they found just a few blocks away from here could have killed 500,000 people.
This is what 114 pounds of fentanyl looks like. Enough, the DEA says, to kill 25 million Americans.
Fentanyl doesn't kill people. People who use unsafe doses or unregulated doses of fentanyl often overdose and no one's around to help them. And it's not because of the drug, it's because of the culture we live in where people are using those drugs the way they're using them. But put yourself in the shoes of a narcotic agent in the United States nowadays. You know you're a good guy, you're out there fighting the good fight, and now this jerk comes along with what you believe to be a car full of death, this monster ghost that I guess can just go out into Colorado and kill every person if left unregulated. And you do what cops do. You get him into a room, you interrogate him, you get him to give up other people, and in the end, you offer him a deal. Go ahead and deliver the drugs, we'll follow you there, and we'll bust in and arrest everybody. And this is where these two stories have something in common. Both situations are the result of how we fight the war against drugs and drug users in the United States. I mean, just think about how ridiculous it is to even suggest that people are going to buy fentanyl pills and then hand them out to your children at Halloween. To what end? For what purpose? Now add to this the extra step of the cartels are trying to do it, because I guess that's a good way to bump their $100 million a week industry up to $200 million a week. It makes no logical sense. But more importantly, both of these situations point back to the real problem. There's these chemicals that can be sold in the United States for exaggerated sums of money, and I mean incredible amounts compared to what they cost to produce. Heroin and cocaine are more valuable by weight than gold in the streets of the United States. And now that we moved on to drugs like fentanyl, that are cheaper to produce and more potent so more can be shipped to a location in the same size package? Well, we can't be surprised that no matter how hard we try to get rid of the supply, it's just not going away. There's billions of dollars to be made. It could all go away tomorrow if we just legalized and regulated all drugs. No one would be smuggling these chemicals across the country or dyeing them all sorts of colors and letting us make up stories about how people are going to slip them into our kids' Halloween candy. If people could just go to the pharmacy or to the doctor's office or to the dope shop and pick up their narcotics. Xanax, to borrow just one example, comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. From the small football-shaped peach ones that are also white or at times blue, to the larger ones that are yellow or green, to the big old bricks that are either green or white, that are a different shape even, a shape that's kind of fun and looks like a Lego. But you know what you'd never hear, since it's a pharmaceutical company that's behind Xanax? They're making these drugs different colors to tempt our kids into taking them. But Xanax, like any opioid, including fentanyl, is a drug that you could indeed take way too much of if somebody stuffed it into a pill that was pressed on the street using unsafe, unreliable supplies of drugs. You might end up with a brick that has 14 milligrams of Xanax in it, and you overdose. But that doesn't mean the manufacturers right now are marketing it to our kids, and it definitely doesn't mean anybody's going to buy a bunch of it and slip it into their Halloween candy bag. So who cares, right? I mean, if we're just talking smack about drug cartels and everybody's getting all worked up because the news is again grabbing onto a if it bleeds it leads story, then what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is all the people that are living in addicted situations right now and navigating a world that is again increasingly designed to make their lives more difficult, to cause people to turn away from their suffering. Anybody that's at the point that they're dumping a heavy narcotic into their system at such a level that they're having a hard time functioning in other spaces of their life deserves our compassion, our empathy, never a jail cell. The stigma in our culture is so deep and so old that it's almost invisible unless we really keep looking right at it and pointing it out. And these news stories and the police rhetoric that's behind them is just one more example of that stigma in action. The war on drugs is slowly but surely coming to an end one way or another. And the sooner we get on board and make these substances safe, cheap, legal, and easy to find, the sooner the things that we're talking about, that we're spending all this energy and time being afraid of and lying to each other about, the sooner they won't exist anymore. Because again, no one will be able to sell these chemicals in an underworld market once somebody can just go get a safe supply from the office just up the street. So anyway, enjoy the next few weeks of this story. I'm sure it'll continue to pick up steam, and it'll probably come with some more of those bizarro videos of police officers thinking that they're overdosing on fentanyl from touching it. Again, not going to happen, but that doesn't mean that people don't think it's happening and their brains just take over from there. But just know your kids are safe to go out and go trick-or-treating. And besides, most of us go through their candy to take all the good stuff once they get home anyway. That's it. Love yourselves and the addicted people in your life, and don't dye your fentanyl different colors. I'm Ben Boyce.
These bright and rainbow-colored pills mimic the shape and size of candy, but they are in fact highly lethal fentanyl pills.